was a city girl, moved to the country, and was not used to having all kinds of goodies in my water and the cistern, for one thing. And when they went to clean the cistern, most of the men sent their women to town so they wouldn't see the frogs and so forth that were in the cistern. And that is, I think, that was the big thing. I thought it was so unsanitary, and we used it and we all lived and our kids were never sick, so.
I grew up on a farm in Moody County that did not have good quality water. We had a deep well that was very hard, very poor water. And we had to haul water from town and put in a cistern to use for household use. Our well water was not good enough quality. And I grew up that way, and after I started farming and had moved out there with my family, I had 4 little kids, and we were always short of water. We had to be very careful about how much water we used because we were always running out.
The farm I bought in 1968, the well was inadequate for the amount of livestock that we were trying to raise, and so I drilled a new well, and that well, I had an open bottom well. By that I mean I did not have a sand point necessarily, but the water quality was very poor.
Before rural water, we lived on the farm for 10 to 15 years without rural water, and it was harder. We had a well, a deep well, but it was very hard water. It had a lot of iron, a lot of rust. We had perhaps the biggest water softener that you could buy for the home, but it still didn't always take care of the problem. If you washed white clothes just before it was time for your water softener to recycle, you might have had striped clothes instead of white or spotted clothes. Also, if you happen to draw 1 drop of water from your pipes while your water softener was recycling, then you got salty coffee, which was another thing that was not good. And of course, you didn't have any dishwasher, anything like this before rural water, because it just wasn't, you didn't have the pressure, you didn't have the softness. There was just a lot of things that you didn't have.
I had never even heard of a rural community water system until I was visiting with Tom Myler, the county Farmers Home Administration officer, one day, and he asked me if that was something I'd be interested in. And I thought about it a little bit, and I thought, well, that's a good idea, but how can that work? Well, about that time, Sioux Valley Electric had an information meeting and invited Sioux Valley members from the area to come into this meeting to talk about the problems that they had with their water supply. So I went to that meeting, and there must have been, I don't know, maybe 150 people there. And Richard Lohman, the chairman of the Lincoln County system, was one of the main speakers, and he talked about what they had done to get their system started. And they had been going for a year or 2 before us. Anyhow, the question was brought up, how many people there would be interested in seeing something like this get started in our area. And most of the people there thought that it was a good idea. So they picked kind of at random people to serve on a steering committee that represented different areas in the community. And I happen to represent the northeastern part of the community, of the county. And we had an organizational meeting right after the information meeting, and this organizational meeting selected some officers to help put this thing together, and I was chosen as chairman. And from then on, it took off.
I felt, and a lot of other people felt, that we really needed a rural water system in this part of the.
At that time, I was also a director on the Kingsbury Electric Cooperative, and I had an opportunity to go over to Clear Lake to a Northeast Directors meeting, and at that meeting, Cliff Jacobson, who was the public relations man from Sioux Valley, was there, and he gave us a little presentation about PVC pipe and some of the things that were going on down at Lincoln Rural Water System. And on the way home I said, hey, wouldn't this be great for Kingsbury Electric to get involved in? Roland Anderson was our manager at that time, and he picked up on it. And so we tried to have a kind of informative meeting in DeSmet, which wasn't really very well attended. But a number of us, Jerry Icast and myself and a neighbor by the name of Bud Wenspeck, we decided that we would canvass Badger Township, which we did, and we had about a 90% sign up with just good intention fees, $25. It wasn't hard to get $25. And then they kind of found out that, well, hey, maybe we were serious. And so we had a meeting in Arlington, and it was at that meeting that I was elected chairman of Kingbrook Steering Committee. And from there on, we pretty soon decided that Badger Township wasn't going to be our boundaries. We were going to get a lot bigger than that. And things just progressed on, and so when I found out about PVC pipe and making a visit down to Lincoln Rural Water, why, hey, I decided, hey, this is something that we got to do.
It was amazing the way people worked together to do that, to first form the association and then continue to lobby for the funds that were needed.
Well, I think the biggest obstacle that we had to overcome was getting the funding to get going, and we needed help from the government to get that started. And at the time I was in the state legislature, we got some funding from the state to start and help with the rural water system.
I made many trips along with Carol Anderson and Jerry Icast because they were on the board to appear during legislative sessions. And at one time, there was a move for all employees of rural water to be licensed plumbers. This we were able to shoot down. There was also a move at one time to tax rural water, and that was also defeated.
Being in the legislature, when we were first starting the rural water systems, we were stocked with a tax that the city people didn't pay. And that was a 2% gross receipts tax that we eliminated while I was in the legislature. In fact, I was one of the main sponsors of the bill to drop that off, to make it more equal between the rural and the city.
It didn't take very long, but you know, we didn't see any money, the vast amount of money it takes to really develop a rural water system. Because we couldn't get enough people to sign up. They just simply wouldn't, even though they needed the water. They wouldn't believe that it was possible. So we had all kinds of people coming forward with the different kinds of ideas.
The legislature seen fit, I think, to provide some grant dollars. And I was quite surprised after being out to here, and when Henry Poppin was chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and we met in his committee, and a few days later, I got a check in the mail for $300,000, which was grant dollars from the South Dakota legislature.
And I think that's been the common voice for all of the rural water systems. The state association started about the same time Brookings Dual did, and I think just that commonality of direction and goals has provided the largest benefit to the rural water system, being able to go to the legislature or to lenders and having a story to tell that fit with what was going on in rural South Dakota.
I think the National Rural Water Association, their biggest help has been through their legislative work in Washington on the national level. Their work with Congress, the amount of money they've been able to get, is really the reason that we have so many rural water systems here in South Dakota and throughout the country.
Started with Brookings Dual just prior to original construction in 1976. Bill Dempsey at that time was chairman of the board. And the story with the board, and I still have 4 original board members from the original organization in '74. But the reason I got the job was at the job interview process. I had some sheep manure on my boots, and I figured I should know my way around the countryside.
The biggest challenge we faced in building our rural water system was probably funding. Easements were probably the second biggest challenge, because there were places where we had to take the public right-of-way, and we had one case in Kingsbury County where one of the well, I shouldn't call him a disgruntled person, but anyway, he said that the public right-of-way was given for roads and roads only. But the county commissioners at that time sided with us and said, hey, if you want to go in the road ditches, we'll give you the right-of-way to do that.
So consequently, there was a lot of ill feelings, very strong ill feelings.
To this day, there's still strong feelings of animosity between the people that live in the southern part of the county as opposed to those of us in the northern part that have the water now. And it's been 30 years nearly, and they're still hard.
I think the biggest challenge was convincing people that it actually would happen. Most people that we talked to back in the early days of our system really couldn't realize, they wouldn't believe that you could dig water lines out in the country and bring water to every farm in the area.
To begin with, I was one of the persons that went around and talked to my neighbors whether they would be interested in signing up. And I still can see the looks of their eyes when I mentioned it. They look, you know, what are you talking about? And nowadays they're all hooked up.
When we talk about rural water, I guess I remember very well the days that our neighbor Bud Wansbeck and Jerry Eichest and Alec sat by our kitchen table wondering if there would be any possibility to replace this bad water that we had with a rural water, possibly for Badger Township. And they did a lot of inquiring around the township to see if there were people interested in such. Jerry Ikest and Alec ended up on the steering committee and going ahead and working with it. Bud Wansbeck did not live long enough to see the completion of the system or anything like that, but he was just as enthused as the other two were about beginning it. And also, while they were doing this running around, if Alec and Jerry at least would not have had a wife and a family at home to do chores and this sort of thing for them while they were gone, they perhaps would not have gotten to do the legwork that they did. But I think Audrey Ikest and myself and several other mothers or wives would have thought that it was well worth what we did in order to have the outcome that we got.
With Kingbrook, we had to go by phases when we built that because we needed the density that we could get by going up around Lake Poncet. And now when I think about West River and some of those places where it's miles between places, why I just have to say, hey, no way.
Well, there was a lot of challenges back in the 70s building a system when you were one of the first ones built, I guess, one of the group of first 2 or 3 built. One of the main challenges, I guess, was the funding scenario. Back in the 70s, we didn't have the dedicated water fund. We didn't have a lot of grant dollars to work with. We didn't have state revolving fund, those kind of things. So it was always a challenge trying to find the money. And at that time, about the only source of money was the Farm Home Administration program. The feasibility was a big issue with building a system back in those days. You had to make sure that you had enough customers to support the system when you got done. We had to have 1,200 back in the 70s, which was a relatively large system at that time. We did wind up getting to 1,200 eventually, and they approved our system. A lot of those 1,200 were what we call bulk users, developments and stuff, where they wanted to put on 100 users in the future and this kind of stuff. So it became quite an issue with the feasibility thing, and we did go from the 1,200 on up to 1,800 before the system was completed, and today we're at 4,200, so it has turned out to be a pretty successful.
makes me feel really good when I look at over the map of the systems in our state. You compare that to some of the other states when we go to a conference, and we are way ahead of the rest of the states as far as getting water to everybody.
Over the years, one thing we've learned is our pipes weren't big enough, and we've done a lot of expansion in the past because of that, and it's been a long process, but we're coping with it, and the funding mechanism is better today than it was back in the 70s, so it's quite a little easier to build a system today than it was 30, 35 years ago.